Hello, this is TJR. If this is your first time here, welcome. If not, welcome back. In June of 1972, Walter Rogers, David Gilmour, Rick Mason, and some other guy entered Abbey Road Recording Studios to work on what would be their next album. Entering the legendary recording studio with producer Alan Parsons and a couple of pounds of skunk weed, it would be 2 weeks before bassist Dodger Waters would suggest that perhaps they should have brought their instruments to the recording session as well. And so the separate band members went their separate ways to their various separate homes, some of them getting lost along the way. A week would pass before their eventual return. During this time, rumors would circulate that their keyboardist, whose name even the other band members couldn't seem to remember, got so sidetracked that he mistakenly arrived at the recording sessions for Exile on Main Street by the Rolling Stones. The Stones, so insanely lit themselves at this time, actually didn't notice that he had replaced Nicky Hopkins on a number of tracks before Mick Jagger finally asked, "Hey, who is this guy?" Discovering that their 2 pounds of skunk weed was nothing more than a bad mixture of chopped oregano and basil, the band now had no choice left but to start recording their next album. An album that upon its release would grow in infamy and eventually become known throughout the world. But sadly, not for the reasons that the band had initially hoped for. The band, of course, is Pink Floyd, and their album would later become known as one of the worst, if not the very worst, album of the classic rock era ever. Dark Side of the Moon was released in March of 1973. It was the follow-up to their 1971 album entitled Metal, a collection of heavy metal Norwegian folk song melodies with new lyrics written by bassist Roger Wilco. A musical concept that definitely sounded better on paper than it did in final execution. In a later interview, guitarist David Gilmour noted that the whole thing might have sounded a lot better if we just realized that guitar amplifiers aren't waterproof. Metal was a debacle for the band, but there was one bright spot. The single, One of These Days, Alice, and its B-side, A Pillow of Wind in the Willows, did manage to break into Rolling Stone's Worst Songs of the 70s chart, just beneath Billy Don't Be a Hero by Paper Lace, only to be knocked out of that position 1 week later by Bo Donaldson and the Haywoods' version of the same song. And so it was with a true sense of determination and genuine need for redemption that the band again entered Abbey Road Studios, and actually remembering this time to use the front door versus the service entrance. This time, bassist Roger Dodger took the bull by the horns and decided on a unifying conceptual theme for the album. Parsons suggested they push for big themes like conflict, greed, time, death, and mental illness. Waters, who was a big fan of the Japanese series Johnny Sacco and his flying robot, instead wanted to make the album all about robots and suggested the title I, Robot in reference to the Isaac Asimov novel. Producer Alan Parsons called out this idea as complete, utter nonsense and total rubbish, but he did suggest that a better title would be Domo Arigato, Mr. Roboto. Thankfully, this idea was also abandoned. Eventually, the entire band and producer Alan Parsons all agreed to the conceptual idea of the band channeling the late famed songwriting duo of Rodgers and Hart. This would be an attempt to recreate the fabled and lost original soundtrack for The Wizard of Oz. And thusly, the Over the Rainbow Prism album cover was born. Even in 1972, the original Rodgers and Hart penned soundtrack of The Wizard of Oz had become the stuff of musical legend. The original recordings, boxed up and lost in the same archive in which the United States government now hides the Ark of the Covenant and the bodies of the aliens pulled from the Roswell wreckage, formerly known as Area 51. Having gotten their hands on some of the real stuff this time, the band would spend 7 months smoking and crafting soundscapes for the album. Truth be told, they spent most of that time just smoking, But utilizing a combination of live instrumentation, synthesizers, tape loops, and sounds that the band hijacked off of much better sounding records, they still couldn't craft any kind of a cohesive album. Alan Parsons, hoping to jumpstart the Alien recording sessions, tried convincing the band to record in a way that the Floyds had previously never tried before. This included having the band use things like microphones, reel-to-reel tape machines, and actually connecting cables from their instruments to their amplifiers. At first, the band seemed energized by this radical new approach, but it was all to no avail, as they quickly dismissed Parsons' approach as a bunch of establishment bourgeois nonsense. Okay. By now, of course, if you've made it this far, you know you're on to the fact that this is an April Fool's gag. Dark Side of the Moon is one of the best albums ever, and I've talked about it in the past and probably will talk about it in the future. But the internet being such a breeding ground for reactionaries, people who react first and then think afterwards, I am sure that there will be at least a couple people who didn't understand this was a gag or didn't even watch the video, just left a comment based on the thumbnail alone and left a nasty comment saying, you don't know anything about Pink Floyd, you don't know anything about this album, this is the greatest album ever. If you see any of those comments, please do me a favor and just respond to them with the word busted. And as many people who want to any single person who does that comment, feel free, go right ahead. Just because someone else left a comment, don't feel that you don't have to. Please go right on ahead and enjoy. Anyways, everybody, thank you for watching. Happy April Fool's Day. And thank you, patron supporters, for all the support you give. Patron supporters get exclusive weekly videos, not available here on the channel. If you'd like to be a patron supporter, go to patreon.com/TJR the original. And if you can't be a patron supporter, you can just show your support by clicking like and sharing these videos with anyone you think might be interested. And again, everybody, thank you so much for your support. Happy April Fool's Day. Hope you all have a great day. Take care. Bye-bye.